Hey everyone, this is Andy Hall. With me tonight is Patrick Green. Patrick Green is a blogger, also on Patheos non-religious channel, and I'm going to read you his bio. Patrick's got a great story. I'm going to read his bio, and I don't even know how the conversation is going to go. I'm sure we're going to talk about Trump and the election, all this other stuff, and we're going to have a fun, fast, as always, right, and informative hour. So here's his bio. Pat Green is a former minister who left ministry and entered the secular life around the time his son came out as transgender. Today, as a photographer, writer, and storyteller, he is trying to navigate his way through this new existence. His professional writing has been seen in various publications, both online and in print, for over the last 12 years. He is a regular contributor to 22nd Century Media, Aquarius News, and also in the secular spectrum on Patheos. Pat also wrote a book in 2015 titled Night Moves, An Ex-Preacher's Journey to Hell in a Taxi, which is available online on Amazon. His professional photography has been featured in various newspapers, websites, and other formats since 1985. Most recently, Pat is a proud member of the Artists Guild of Lockport. With Pat's passion for his son, his new life is told as honestly and as openly as he can. Patrick, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. It's we were talking before the show about how we run basically in the same clique on Patheos and on Facebook, but this is the first time we have actually had a chance to sit down and chat together. I guess I would be remiss to say that we should talk about at least the election. I'm personally happy. I'm ecstatic.
My God, within a month and a half after he got elected, DeVos rolled back all of the Title IX rights that had been fought so hard for during the Obama administration for kids like my child. And it's just been one nightmare after another, and it is amazing. I'm just realizing now how much anxiety it truly caused me as I went about the city yesterday outside of Trump Tower, shooting people, enjoying and celebrating, and thinking, this is okay? Where this part, I mean, it's not over, but this part is. I don't have to deal with that anymore. That was profound and weird.
Right. So what? So you're going around the city center, you were doing photography yesterday?
Yeah, I was doing street photography.
Yeah, I've seen.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I've seen some of your pictures, some of your photographs. Very nice. A lot of black and white stuff.
I love the black and white. The symbolic reason for it is everything is a shade of gray. There is no true black, true white, true good, true evil. That was a paradigm I believed when I was a minister, and now I'm embracing the grayscale.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
For people who aren't aware of what happened to what Betsy DeVos did in terms of taking back all those rights, you want to just go over some of the low points of what she did?
Boy, it's been so long since I wrote a column about it whenever it first occurred. But a couple of key points that happened is, first of all, transgender people no longer had it written as a civil rights defense that they could have access to the locker room or bathrooms of their gender identity. And so you only had state laws and school district policies protecting your kids at that point. In our case, in Illinois, we were fine, but there were kids just across the border in Indiana that weren't, and it was a huge turnaround. It was a huge step backwards from that basic simple thing. Along with that came that affected not just trans people and LGBT people, but also a lot of young ladies, is that there was a huge change and a rollback into how much a victim's account of sexual assault would be investigated and how it would be investigated. And it basically made it, I mean, it's already difficult, but they made it even worse and nearly impossible.
Right. And the fantastic thing is once the Biden administration gets in there, all of these actions that DeVos did will easily be able to be rescinded
Right.
with the next administration.
Yeah, we're in the executive order game again, only this time it's in our favor.
Yeah, which is still disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
The idea that basic rights are at the whim of whoever happens to be in the big seat for those 4 years.
And it amazes me that in 2020 we are still having a conversation, and the conversation is mostly done by middle-aged white cishets who have positions of power determining who has a right. And that should not be the case. And one of the sidebars that I've had is I've seen a lot of well-meaning friends of mine who, like me, are cis hetero, after the election saying, "Gay people, we stood up for you." And it's like, yeah, great, but you shouldn't have had to.
Right. And it's a sign of the wider culture having an issue about treating people as people, treating individuals as human beings. And so that's why it's so important to when confronted with racism or with bigotry, to actually speak out against it. And it's difficult. It is difficult. And sometimes, I have an 8-minute comedy routine about how I encountered something so racist and crazy. I was just stunned for the 2 minutes that it occurred. And then I thought about it for like days afterwards. And so, yes, being able to be an advocate for people, for minorities, hey, Chris Mallett here from the Daily Atheist Morning Show is in the chat. But yeah, it's a muscle. I think it's a muscle that's
what Dr. Maya Angelou always used to compare courage to.
Right. And I was reading, I had David Niosi on from, he was president. So David Niosi was on the channel a couple of weeks ago, and he wrote an article for Psychology Today about how we have evolved to be cowards to a certain extent because we want to get along. We want to get along with each other. And so we have all these cognitive biases baked into us. And one of them is just wanting to agree with each other, even when that's patently wrong.
It's uncomfortable, and it's standing up is a learned behavior. You have to fight that instinct of just wanting to go along with the flow, because who wants to be the awkward guy or gal at the party that is making everything political? But it's not making everything political. It's saying that the racist joke isn't funny. It's saying that the gay joke isn't funny. And it's saying that microaggression is a horrible thing to say and think about people. And at first, when you're building that muscle, it may just come to a point where you're like, oh, look at the time, I have to leave the party. But then if you get stronger and you build that muscle, you can get to the point where you can make that stand. But each individual who does that, they have to grow at their own pace. But I'm never going to ask somebody, be a huge advocate, stand up every time, but learn to build that muscle. Learn to walk out of the room when it's uncomfortable, and then at some point learn to stand up and say something.
Right. And sometimes it's just a question. I mean, I think, it's no surprise that I'm an old dude. There's no surprise I'm an old dude.
I have no gray hairs here.
Right. So I have tried to develop this aura of skepticism around me between a variety of behavioral cues, like just looking at people in certain ways when I hear something that doesn't make any sense to me, or that I find that they might be crossing a line, or that it just doesn't smell right. And sometimes, and I've done this a million times on the Daily Atheist Morning Show, I'll just repeat the same thing that someone just told me slowly, just so that I understand it. Because sometimes when people hear their own words back at them, there's a realization that, oh, what I just said, it may not make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be useful without being too controversial or too adversarial, which I don't know. Maybe that's my knee-jerk reaction, is just to be a jerk. My knee-jerk reaction is just to be a jerk. Maybe that's it, Patrick.
It could be. It could be. All I know is sometimes I get too aggressive too fast. A lot of that is a function of after I left the ministry, I was a taxi driver. And the first couple of weeks, an ex-minister driving a taxi was like Opie Taylor driving a cab on the east side of Joliet. And I had to learn how to toughen up real fast. And you learned how to get counter-aggressive with drunk people, with unruly people, with people that you just didn't want in your cab.
Yep.
And that point of aggression, you found out it's empowering, it feels good, and it can stop something from going out of control really fast. But the problem is, I don't always turn it off when I should.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about a common comedian problem right here, is being able to shut off the instinct of just coming back really fast with a comment or saying something that maybe it might be funny, or you may think it sounds sounds good, but once it actually comes out of your mouth, it's like, oh, that was inappropriate in so many ways.
Yeah. Don't really have much to add to that.
Right. So, anyone who watches the channel knows that I worked with, people who have disabilities for about 25 years, a variety, people who have head injuries, adolescent boys, people born with disabilities, and some of them have been violent. Sometimes, I've been in violent situations, and I've had to try to de-escalate the other person. What skills did you learn while driving a taxi about de-escalating people?
Most of the time, it was using an authoritative dad voice to a drunk person who was around my age.
All right.
And that authoritative dad voice, which I was used to because at the time my kid was 13, 14 years old, that usually got them to calm down really quick because they were just like, oh my God, Dad's mad at me. I better simmer down. And, you would get drunk alpha boys suddenly going, sorry, sir. Yes, sir. That was the biggest tool. The other tool, whenever I felt it was going to get completely out of control and possibly violent, I would personalize. I would use soothing tones. I would talk about myself. I would talk about my kid, ask them their name, and just try to keep it, hey, if you're going to stab me, you're going to stab a human being. Let's get to know each other in this very unpleasant moment. And that would often work. And then other times, you had to do other things.
Right.
I mean, you were basically a cash register on wheels in the Chicago night.
Dude, yeah, that's what I've heard about. I've had buddies who drive cabs years ago, too, before you could use your credit card. So it was all cash.
Right.
And dangerous business at times.
Mm-hmm. But it also taught me more about humanity than 19 years of ministry ever could have.
Well, tell me about that.
Okay, well, when I was a minister, even as a progressive minister at the end, we went to seminars and stuff to try to understand the plight of the homeless, the plight of the addict. And everything was from a very academic level. And we were the great white hope reaching down to the rescue pup instead of a human being. Now when the dynamic changes, and I've got the prostitute in the back seat making multiple stops, I'm concerned about her safety for a different reason. I'm understanding her world, and I'm hoping to God she tips me. The dynamic of the relationship changes from me being the great white hope that knows everything and she's something else to realizing that I'm involved in something that I don't understand, and the only way to understand it is to listen. The same thing with the homeless people, the same thing with the addicts and the drunks. It was always about the relationship dynamic changing. I was no longer the authority. I was no longer the educated. And I learned very fast that I didn't know jack about what they were actually going through. Everything that I read in the books, every pastoral seminar I went to was wrong. And that was hard to reconcile.
It sounds like from what you were saying, as a minister, you were talking more at people,
Hmm.
and when you're doing the cab, you're listening a lot more.
You're listening a lot more, and you grow to like them and love them. I mean, driving at night, 72 hours a week, that was your life. The daytime life was something that was completely foreign to me, except for being a father.
Yeah.
And it got strangely addictive, but these people also became your family. I mean, as brutal as the world was, you understood the rules, and the rules were simple. And everybody else come in trying to fix us were interlopers. And at the same time, you had the great hypocrisy that all of these people that were there to try to change the world, in the dead of night, they'd take a taxi to get their fixations. You know, the term that I always used is they were out for either blow or blow jobs. So they needed all of that. They needed the darkness of the night to still be dark so that they could get their fix.
Mm,
So talking about fixing it was never really completely genuine.
right. It sounds, from my experience of therapy,
Hmm.
where the person, where the therapist asks you questions and guides you along, or just allows you just to talk. It sounds more like taxi cab therapy more than anything else. I mean, and that might even be a too blunt kind of term, but just letting a person talk is therapeutic in itself.
In a sense, it was probably the most authentic confession booth I'd ever been in.
That's powerful.
I had a conversation. There was a bartender that I used to drive home a lot, and I'd pick her up when her bar closed and take her home. And her and I used to have amazing conversations. Most of it was about music, art. But one night we were having a conversation about the church, and she
Hmm.
said, "We're the church of the night." She goes, "I'm serving the communion with every beverage, and when you take them home, you're the confessional booth." And they have their absolution, and they go home and sleep it off and start their new day.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you have a crazy story from one that doesn't incriminate you or anyone else? Do you have a crazy story from driving a cab? Or what's your
I,
craziest story from driving a cab?
I have a lot of crazy stories, but the one that sticks out most in my mind is the one that was bizarre. And it doesn't really get people excited because they want to hear about the crazy drunk person or the addict or the person that did something weird. But one day I picked up this woman. She's 7 months pregnant, and we do a 40-mile run. I mean, it was a great fare for me. We did a 40-mile run, and we stopped at this chicken shack. She goes inside the chicken shack, and she buys one chicken breast
Hmm.
and a beverage, and there was something else. I think there was a pickle. I'm not sure. And then she gets back and she's like, "Okay, take me back home." And I'm just like, "What this? You've just spent like $120 in cab fare to get one piece of chicken and a pickle." And she
Hmm.
goes, "I'm." And she just looks at me and she goes, "I'm effing pregnant. Deal with it." And that was the one that always stuck out with me because for her it was worth it. She had a craving and she wanted that piece of chicken from a place that she probably hadn't been to in a long time. I mean, the stories about almost getting robbed, the stories about the crazy drunks, the DUI people you would pick up. I have all of those. In the book, I talk about a beautiful one where I actually got to befriend a 90-something-year-old black man who was a World War II vet.
Hmm.
And he and I both shared a love for Westerns. And he didn't know that the Coen brothers had remade a very classic one. So I went over to his house with the DVD on my day off. He made me some hoagies and grape soda, and we had this beautiful, serene time watching True Grit together.
True Grit. Yeah,
Hmm.
I saw. I've seen the original and I've seen the remake too. Yeah, very enjoyable movies.
Yeah. And it was a moment that I never would have had as a minister. I never would have thought to have a conversation with this old man who was living on food stamps about Westerns
Yeah.
and then accept his invitation to have him make me hoagies. and watch this movie together. I mean, that never would have happened, but the dynamic changed where we're just having a conversation. It just made total sense. Yeah, let's do this.
Right. You know, when you talk about the chicken breast and pickle story, it's interesting because from what I've seen, and this is my growth as a skeptic too, as my attempt to live a more rational, or try to make rational decisions, I guess. And from what I've noticed and what I've seen in my fellow skeptics is that we might be okay at logic, but not always following the data points or the raw data as it comes in. So, for an example, it doesn't make a lot of sense to drive 20 miles to go get a chicken breast and a pickle and then drive back. But people will tell you the reason why they're doing it. They will tell you. And what's important is being able to hear that as against to just throwing your assumptions on what's going on.
Well, and that's actually something that I'm having to face in my life on a daily basis. I don't know how well you keep up with my social media, but this week will be the 1-year anniversary of the day that I made a serious attempt at my life.
Yeah. Yes.
And coming through that has been the most challenging time of my life. Every day is work, and that work is challenging the illogical lies that you tell yourself about your self-worth, about how horrible everything really is versus it really isn't that bad, and those cognitive disconnects and facing those. But then also having to allow yourself room for the whimsical and the illogical and embracing that.
How, I mean, I know that, I was a psych major and also did some therapy, been in therapy too. And I have a variety of little tricks of trying to keep the negative thoughts managed, right? Managed. Mm-hmm. What are some of the methods or strategies that you use?
In the moment, the first thing I always go to is deep breathing. Deep breathing gets me through the crisis moment, and then I get to be aware. I journal, and my journaling is very sloppy. I just write down phrases, and the phrases will be like, you're dirt, you're shit, you're nothing, you're this, you're this. And then I start looking at that, and I have to challenge that. And it's like, no, that's not who you are. You're a good father. Not having as much money in your bank account as you want isn't a failure of you. There's a lot of things broken in this system. You're doing your best. I mean, we place so much emphasis on ourselves based on our bank account, based on our weight, based on our looks, based on all of these stupid exterior things that don't reflect the content of our character or what it is that we aspire to do in this life.
I will say that the breathing has been helpful for me too. Not just breathing, but learning how to breathe correctly, right? I mean, with the belly breathing, because it's easy to do the shallow breathing up here. I feel like I'm grabbing my tits right here. But to actually learn how to breathe in a way that lowers my blood pressure, that calms me down, and helps take me out of my own head, out of that whole crazy cycle of thinking.
Oh yeah, and the weird part is, when I first got out, I did my own little version of High Fidelity, not realizing that I was channeling my inner John Cusack.
Right.
And I mean, right before I made the attempt on my life, I had just ended a 3.5-year relationship had just ended, and my mom was also dying, and it was just all felt too much. But I had believed this narrative that I was this horrible person who didn't deserve to be with anyone. So I started contacting ex-girlfriends going all the way back to high school, with the exception of 2 that it just wouldn't be good for us to speak anymore. And never once did they confirm my narrative. Yeah. The one thing that they did confirm is, it was always hard watching you try to be anything other than yourself, because who you were was beautiful. And you were always trying to impress me, and you didn't have to. And from that, I have some amazing friends. A woman that I dated back in 2015 is probably now one of my closest and dearest friends because of those conversations that we had. And it's beautiful to have that friendship, and to be able to have somebody to talk to and say, yeah, I feel like garbage today. Oh yeah, I get that, me too.
I have to tell you, if you're going to do an OkCupid or some kind of dating online profile, one of the bullet points, one of the pieces on your resume would be still in contact, pretty friendly with exes, but not in that kind of way. Because if you're our age and if every single ex you have hates you, that's a little suspect. I think Patrick. I think that's a little suspect. But being on good terms, or at least they don't want to kill you, something positive like that. I think it's.
Well, there were the 1 and 2 that I didn't call.
Yeah, well, out of a long dating career and relationship career, there's definitely people I wouldn't call either, or definitely would not call me, except in the most negative way possible.
Yeah.
What helps me too is, and I've been told this in therapy. It's like, Andy, everybody has crazy thoughts, and for some reason that helps me kind of. It lessens the power of those thoughts over me, those kind of intrusive thoughts. It's like, oh, well, everyone has wacky thoughts. Maybe I'll just make a joke out of it. I don't know. But it definitely makes me calm. It doesn't raise my anxiety that I'm having this particular thought.
Well, one of the things that I'm finding is I'm letting that inner monologue out to a point of discomfort to other people, but I enjoy it a little bit because talking about my sexual proclivities, talking about some of the inner wacky thoughts, and just letting the F-bombs roll. And you can watch some people say, but for me, it's refreshing. It's just great to get it out on the table and say, yeah, this is who I am. If you don't like it, there's the door or the window.
Right. Critical Cripple in the chat is asking, is it true that comedians get all the girls? No, it's absolutely
God, no, not even close.
It is not close. It's a nice myth. It's a nice myth. But yeah, that is definitely not true.
But
Maybe
for Critical Cripple, I do need to say this. Writing a book. Sapiosexuals are a thing. At some of my book signing events, I really don't want to admit how many, but a couple of my reviews on my book on Amazon are people that I've slept with after meeting them, having read the book.
I'm doing this writing thing all wrong, Patrick. I think this is an intervention of what I'm doing wrong with my life. Of course, I'm in a happy relationship, so that's really irrelevant to me right now.
Write a book, you'll be a rock star.
I wrote a book of short stories, a horror book. And, at no point did anyone say, wow, I want to sleep with Andy Hall because of these artfully written vampire stories. At no point whatsoever.
Well, back then I also had the bad boy vibe going because when I was driving the taxi, it was always leather jackets and skull bracelets and I'm still rocking the dangly earring. So.
Oh, right. Yeah. You mentioned something about how our and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but our capitalistic society can make people feel bad and actually either exacerbate whatever mental illness a person has, or actually create mental illness in a person. Mm-hmm. And I think it's part of the system. I think it's just baked into capitalism in this hierarchical system that we live in here in the States.
Oh my God! Well, have you ever seen Glenberry Glen Ross?
Dude, I love that movie. I will go through, and my girlfriend, she's like, "Are you going to talk about Always Be Closing again, Andy?" But it's such a good bit.
But the thing is, that movie, as depressing and horrible and funny as it is, most ex-ministers, myself included, we end up getting hired into sales, and that's what most of us end up into, and it is a horrible experience in many companies, and it is that Glenberry Glen Ross. I remember one time I was working for this company not too far away from me, and we were doing bath remodels, and I was in sales for that. And I had this huge, bulky, coked out weirdo for a boss, and he would call me up at the end of the day And he's like, I'm looking at the numbers and I'm going to puke and you're dirt and you're this. And I'm near the plate of tears. And when he finally realizes he's had that moment of control, he's like, all right, brother, let it out. Let it out. We'll find our inner Zen tomorrow. And I'm like, you created this mess. You beat me down. And now you're going to comfort me. God, I pity your wife.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's that's a template for abuse. That's what that is. It in work life as well as domestic life.
Yeah, but sales, there are good sales companies out there. But God, so many of them. It is so dehumanizing. And I've also seen from a different perspective as a taxi driver that a lot of people confuse the service industry with the servant industry. And I see that with people that are servers. I see that with people that are baristas. I even see that with people who are architects. I've got a very dear friend who's an architect, and she gets treated like dirt by some of her clients at the same level that they would treat the person at Burger King to put pickles on their Whopper.
Yeah, yeah. There is a default setting for some people that when they're interacting with someone that is putting pickles on their Whopper or off their Whopper for that matter, that there is this kind of dehumanizing lens that they can see, that they see through. Maybe once again, I'll just go back to dating. That is a red flag for me. If someone I was dating suddenly, talk trash to the waiter or to someone in a cab or in an Uber, that would be a problem for me. That would be a red flag.
I think it's great that bars, coffee shops, and restaurants are usually the first date place because you can see that dynamic. And immediately if the person is dirt.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is a good setting, to tell you the truth. And a lot of my strategy is because I've been doing these kind of podcasts for a while, even though I'm on YouTube now. I was doing the Naked Diner podcast for a number of years, and I picked up a couple of tricks from just asking on like a first date, the very specific questions to get a person talking, and then you go into the general questions, and that's where people start exposing who they are in the world, Patrick. That's when people is like, oh well, these are some of the horrible things I've done within the last week. What do you do? It's like, well, not those horrible things, I'll say that much. So Patrick, what denomination when you were a minister? What denomination were you in?
Oh, good Lord, that was an interesting road. When I started in youth ministry in the 90s, I was the Assemblies of God, which is one of the largest charismatic churches. That's preaching in tongues, health and wealth gospel, yada, yada, yada. Then as I got a little bit older into the late 90s, 2000s, I switched over to Churches of God General Conference, which was more or less your general evangelical church, no tongues. They were into foot washing, but everyone has their fetish. And
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to talk a little bit more about foot washing.
Foot washing.
Foot washing, like on a regular basis. On a regular basis, like
maybe monthly, bi-monthly. The foot washing services to wash somebody's feet as Jesus washed the disciples' feet. So it's an act of humility, connection, intimacy, fetishism. I think churches could make a lot of extra money by pay-per-viewing that stuff, but it's foot action.
Did any women with long hair use their hair for the foot washing action?
No, that was not going on. At least at my church, never saw it.
Okay, all right. But, so please continue.
Yeah, that's all right. But then after I left the foot fetish denomination, and that was over the fact that I had truly crossed the bridge. I'd gotten to know Jay Baker, son of Jim and Tammy Faye, and some other people, and that was really getting my head out of my ass about LGBT issues. And it was from 2006 to 2008. There was this transition going on in my life where, before that, Earth is 6,000 years old. All gay people are an abomination, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's how far over the fence I was. And this was my first point of deconstruction. And the more and more vocal I got about that, basically me and my prior denomination had a divorce. It was amicable. And so I went over to the Progressive Christian Alliance, which is basically, it's basically a lot of Methodists who left over the gay issue. And you also have a lot of lost former evangelicals like me who just needed a place to get ordained so they could stay in the game.
So you were still a believer at that point?
Yes, but fractures were happening.
Yeah. So once again, so you're talking about how you started becoming less fundamentalist, right? Less fundamentalist. You want to talk more about that? Like how did your heart start moving? Because it sounds like it was more of a heart thing than a head thing.
Oh, absolutely. There were two people that were on Jay Baker's Revolution Church used to have a forum, and I became a forum moderator, and I got to know a gay Christian who was also a pastor, and I got to know a lesbian woman. Her and her wife are still dear friends of mine. They live in Orlando, Florida. They might even be watching this right now. Hi, Jennifer. But the two of them didn't theology me. They just became my friends. They saw, and God help them, because I said stupid shit all the time. But they kept on being patient with me, and they broke me down with love. And at this time, my kid still wasn't out. And I shudder to think if those two people hadn't come in my life, what kind of father I would have been. So yeah, 2008 was the final transition, and that was just on the LGBT issues. But then that suddenly left everything else up for grabs. And that led to my entry into the Emergent Church, the Outlaw Preachers, and trendy little things like that. And, you know, they told you to deconstruct and question everything. And as I did that, and after I left ministry, when my kid came out, and driving the cab, I went full on out of faith. And then suddenly those people, the arrows in the back started happening because they're like, deconstruct, tear it down. Oh, not that far, dude. Not that far. And yeah, and then it was a very lonely but refreshing existence.
Right. So you said something that resonated with me, broke you down with love. Does that inform how you interact with people today?
For the most part, yes.
Yeah.
For the most part, yes. However, there's a limit. One of the advocacy things that I do is parents whose kids have just come out as trans. They will be asked by various centers that they call, would you like to have a peer parent talk to you? And those people, they don't know the language. They don't know the lingo. They don't understand anything about what transgender is and what it isn't and what gender fluidity is. But their hearts are in the right place, and you can guide them along. Even if there's resistance to certain aspects, you can guide them along. And I am infinitely patient with them. And, you know, having come from a pastoral background, I speak Christianese, and I can work through them with that. And I can also get real raw with dads, and I'll get to that. You know what? I'm going to get right to that one. Dads, little side note. Dads will sit there and often say, well, how does she know what I didn't even know what I wanted to do when I was 15 for a living. And I'm like, well, remember Jenny, that little redhead in third period? You would look at her, you would get all tingly, and you knew what you wanted to do with her and to her.
Yeah.
You didn't know that you wanted to be a plumber when you were living, but you knew that you wanted to bone her, and you knew that. So at this point, you knew you were cisgender because the tingle felt good, and you also knew that you were heterosexual because you were having these fun little fantasies. And at that point, they stop and they're like, oh yeah, I did know that at 15. So you can go through to them. But where I have the difficulty is I can't do it in 2020 anymore with Trump supporters and evangelicals. I've lost my ability. There are other people that can do it, but I have gone through too much defending my child. I
Yeah.
mean, we've been in front of judges. We have been in front of school superintendents. I've had two principals fired in my little tirade to defend my child's rights. A substitute teacher will never substitute again, and I sleep well at night. But that's exhausting.
Yep.
And I just don't have it in me to deal with those people because at this point, it's willful ignorance and it's hate and it's erasure. And I don't have it in me anymore. So with those people, I either say nothing or I call them out and tell them that they're bastards.
Oh, that is. I empathize, sympathize with your position because there are people I just can't talk to either
And,
without shifting gears into roast battle mode or in just dark comedy mode.
and for people who might be reading my blog right now or looking at it, they'll find that I haven't been writing lately. And a lot of that, I've been writing infrequently compared to what I used to. When
Yep.
I first started Transparent Expedition, the concept was to use a parent's love. We were talking about love earlier. To talk about a parent's love as this universal language to help change minds about transgender and gender fluidity and LGBTQ issues in general, using that parent's love. It didn't work, but something unexpected happened. I've got these beautiful people, this small community that got built around the comments section of the blog, where a lot of these people are transgender people who didn't have a parent like me in their lives. And that's been sublime. And I'm now trying to write to them
That's good.
and to them exclusively because I don't really care what the outside anymore thinks. Let's have this little discussion amongst ourselves, but for everyone else to see. And if they want to get it, fine. If they don't want to get it, screw them.
I think that's powerful because for artists at least, and you know this because you're a photographer as well as writer, that if you are being honest and coming from your own sense of truth from what you know, then that's going to resonate with your audience somehow, some way. It will, in this metaphor, the cream will rise to the top. It will reach people to your audience.
And that's actually, thank you for bringing that up. My street photography, if you pay attention to it, it's not just black and white, but I truly love the connection that I have with people. That moment of eye contact when they realize that their picture is being taken, I give a little kind of a smirk or a grin, and
Yeah.
it's just a natural reaction. So I get that beauty of humanity, and I also am deliberate about shooting a lot of people of color and a lot of people of difference because I want, on a subconscious level, that to be normal. I've been to too many art shows where somebody has drawn a picture of a young black boy and he's got this stern face and this gangsta hat on and they call it streetwise. And it's like, that's not helping.
Yeah.
That's not even realistic. That's not what's going on. I'm out here in the streets of Chicago every day shooting people going to work, going to school,
Yeah.
doing everything. Sorry.
Well, there's a difference between art that is just there for candy, right? Just for there for a quick sugar rush, and then there is art that reveals something innate about the subject and about the person doing the art. And I'm much more of a form of the latter than the former. I would.
I love Chicago, but for me, Chicago is not the skyline. For me, Chicago is the people and the color that exists within every neighborhood and the character and the vibe that changes. I mean, when you're in downtown Chicago, it's one animal. When you are in Pilsen, it's a different animal. When you're in old Chinatown, oh my God, it's like something from another world and it's amazing. And it's all the people. It's not, the architecture helps build the backdrop. Like any good play, you have to have a good set. But the architecture is just a set. It's the people that make the show.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. I was just to back up a little bit about talking to people about sexuality. I have two kids. I talk about them a lot. One is 18 now, and one's 15. Years ago, we were in my car, and a lot of conversations happen when you're in the car, right?
Mhm.
I mean, because you get to look forward. People aren't really engaged. You get to say or be a bit more free with your thoughts. And my son was just grappling with the idea about how can people be different sexually. And I said, well, the thing is, and this is the ice cream analogy that I always like to use. It's like, well, when did you start? What's your favorite ice cream? And he would go, vanilla. It's like, well, when did you decide to like vanilla ice cream? He's like, well, I always like vanilla ice cream. Well, there you go. a lot of sexuality is like that. Is that it is just something that um, and I found that to be a useful way of talking to people about it.
One of the hardest car conversations I had with my kid about sexuality. They were about 16 at the time. They, them are the pronouns that my child
Yep.
now uses. They were about 16 at the time. And they asked me, would you date a transgender woman? And I knew that their question actually was, would you date someone like me? Am I
Yeah.
dateable?
Right.
And that was hugely uncomfortable because I answered honestly, because they can see through my BS. We both have the
Right.
same tells. And I'm like, no, but that's my fault.
Yeah. I
And the continuing story here, just end real quick.
yeah.
I
No, go.
challenged myself, and it wasn't because of that conversation that I decided to have a token relationship. It was because of a change in my mindset. My last relationship that I spoke of, my partner was gender fluid.
Hmm.
And Pastor Pat would have never dated that person. And Pastor Pat would have missed out on 3.5 years of beauty.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's fantastic. When if I don't know, because I was just thinking about what if my kid asked me a question like that. And I guess I don't talk about being bisexual a whole lot because I don't know, I talk about so many different things. But there was a good period of time in my teens that I was repressing it. I wasn't really conscious about it. And so there is a lot about sexuality that I do not know, and that goes there. There's a certain kind of mystery about it, about my own sexuality. That if I was suddenly single again, would I date someone who is trans? It's like I don't know. I like to think that the plumbing, so to speak, is secondary to who the person is, because I'm much more attracted to character more than anything else. So and
I, I was just going to say, I envy pansexuals because I think above everybody in the gender and orientation spectrum, pansexuals are truly attracted to people on a more fundamental level,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's not about anything other than love and lust.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I have types, but there's just the types are secondary. I think for
Hmm.
me, definitely the types are secondary. So yeah, if my kid asked me that, I think I would be like, I don't know, and then I would just go with the whole. A lot of my own sexuality is mystery to me, and so a lot of it is that trying different ice creams, and somehow you discover that you like Rocky Road, and you never had Rocky Road before, and you're like, well, I kind of like this now.
Well, it brings up an interesting question because when I was in high school, we had one guy that was out gay and
Hmm.
one girl that was out lesbian. And, I'm Gen X. I was born in 1970, class of 88.
68.
Um, okay. And how many of us are straight because we didn't have the language to
I
explain what was going on inside our lives? I recently read a statistic, and I don't know if it's true or not, but the statistic is that over 60% of xenials are no longer considered cishet. There's something else on the spectrum. And that I don't think that's because of transgender. They like to say it's a trend in this thing. I think that's because one of the beauty of the internet is you have this ability to find out that there's a language and a
Yeah.
Me Too factor for what you're feeling, and you can talk it out with somebody and you can figure it out. Whereas before, you were this only person in high school who felt you were struggling with this alone, and you dare not bring it up. So, am I straight because that's my orientation, or am I straight because that was the only flavor that they allowed us to even think about?
Patrick Green, you just made an argument for the long tail of sexuality.
Uh-huh.
Right? For those of you who know anything about the long tail of the internet, there you have that. And then, but there is definitely an element of people finding each other online and understanding that there are other people like them. And that creates a sense of community and comfort. And also an acknowledgement that maybe people aren't exactly straight. Yeah, the long tail of sexuality. That should be a blog post article, I think.
Just as an aside, my grandmother, when we told her, and she's no longer with us, but when we told her about my child's new chosen name and everything, she just looked at us for a moment and said, "What's the name again? I don't want to forget it."
Oh, that's good.
And
That's admirable. That's admirable.
so then she just lit a cigarette and said, "We're having fried chicken for dinner." That was
That's fantastic.
But
So,
it turns out that and I don't remember, it was either her or my grandfather had a brother that back then they called a cross-dresser or a transsexual.
right.
And that person, that great uncle in my life, had a very understanding spouse who accepted and affirmed it, but it all had to be done in-house.
Sure,
And
of
only a
course.
select few people knew. So I think my grandmother, loving this ancestor of mine, who I'd never met, had her see it through a different set of eyes, saying,
Right.
"Oh, thank God my grandchild can live in a world where they can be open."
So, what was your strategy? Did you talk to your grandmother first without your child present, or did you just go full in?
Always without my child present, because I didn't know. You basically have to clear the runways
Oh,
because you
yeah.
don't know. And then there's other outside relatives where you write a letter to and you tell them, "Hey, we've got," and you always position it this way whenever you're writing the letter. Parents of transgender children all know about the letter. So you write the letter, and the letter says, "Hey, we've got great news. It turns out we thought we had a daughter. We misunderstood a few things. Our son, Jamie, is now goes by Jamie, da 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 da. All we ask is that you accept that. All we ask is that you use that language. If you have any questions, you come to us. But there's going to be a certain code of behavior at family functions, and if you can't adhere to that, we don't talk to you."
That's great. Critical Cripple has to run from the chat. Good that you're here, Critical Cripple. Always pleasure to have you around. Thanks for being here and engaging in the chat.
Nice not meeting you, but it was fun. Thank you.
That's good because what the letter does is that it really sets down boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a celebration.
Yeah. Good strategy. How did you manage schools? I had, one of my kids got cyberbullied, and we had to go through, and it was nothing in comparison to what you've had to deal with. But what was your playbook? What was your strategy? Were you making it up as you went along, or did you have people assist you? Were there lawyers involved? How did I mean? And I know this could be obviously a multiple hour conversation.
The Reader's Digest condensed version is this. At the very beginning, my ex-wife and I weren't on the same page of understanding on this. And I was seeking, I was at the very beginning stages. So I was still learning from the people at Laurie Children's Hospital Gender Clinic in Chicago through their parent support group, what the rules were and what the rules weren't and what the terminology was. But the school district that my child was in was not safe, was not accepting, was not affirming, would not accept the new name. And suddenly you had a child that was always an honors student with grades hitting rock bottom and having suicidal ideations and cutting episodes. and they never attributed that to their behavior. There was something wrong with the kid. So we ended up moving and going to a different school district, District 96, Hinsdale South High School. Props to them. They had programs in place. They had systems in place where our child's name, our child's gender was accepted. There were a couple problems, but with those problems, we always addressed them head on. There was one point where we had a principal that wasn't on board. That was actually at the old high school, Bolingbrook High School. That Principal White, is no longer with the organization anymore. Now, getting him out was fun because I couldn't get him out on the bullying thing. I had to go through the back door, no pun intended, and find that he wasn't abiding by the Every Child Left Behind statutes and force the school district in an uncomfortable move to have to get rid of him. So, I mean, my conscience is clear. I fought dirty and I fought hard. Whenever I did have to fight, I had Lambda Legal and I had Laurie Children's Hospital always behind me. And my son, my child, forgive me, Harvey always knew I was safe because I wouldn't stop fighting until somebody died. And if that was me, that was okay. I was going to fight and fight hard. There are some parents that just kind of step back, and I get it. Conflict is hard. We touched on this earlier. But I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep punching. And even if I'm black and blue and still on the ground, I'm going to keep swinging. And that's basically what you have to do. I call it the Doctor Who method of diplomacy. First, you give them an opportunity to do the right thing. When they don't take that opportunity, you say, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," and then you destroy.
Yeah.
God, that sounds dark. I am really a dark person.
Well, I think anyone who's funny has to be a little dark.
Yeah,
right?
But that's Anakin Skywalker dark. I mean, and with bad acting too. But anyway.
Well, that's redundant when talking about Anakin Skywalker in general, and I'd like to say that this is a pretty safe space for darkness. But that's, on my YouTube channel. So we're coming down to the end of the hour, and I know that we could be talking about a million other things much more in depth.
We spent the first 20 minutes warming up.
Well, it's funny because this is the first time that we've actually talked with each other, and I do feel like it was a 10-minute, 15-minute kind of to get patter to build into this kind of rhythm of conversation. But dude, is there something you wanted me to ask you that I didn't? Not talking about links or where people can find you online, but was there a topic, something substantive that you wanted to talk about but we didn't get to?
In this post-Trump election, there's going to be a lot of people out there that are having trauma. And the worst thing we can do is dictate to them how they should feel. Should they make peace with Trump supporters? Should they get over it? Do they have the right to celebrate when there's still work to be done? Let them be. They've gone through a lot these last 4 years. And if they're black or they're brown or they've got a disability or they're LGBTQ or, like me, a severe PTSD sufferer, you don't know what they're going through. Give them that space to be whatever they need to be in this transition period. That's it. Because that's all I want from people, and I've been a dick on the internet about it.
You've been a dick about being good to people.
That's basically it. I mean, I've been shamed for celebrating, and it's like, let me have this day. Let me have Saturday to celebrate in the city with my new friends that I've never met. Let me have my time to breathe on Sunday, and on Monday I go back to work.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's those are wise words. Those are wise words, and something that people need to hear too, or a lot of people need to hear. Not all people, but a lot of people.
Yeah, special people. I'll leave them nameless for this time.
Right. We could talk about that after the show's over. Patrick Green, where can people find you online?
All right, if they really, really want to find me online, they can go to Patheos and look up Transparent Expedition. The other place is patgreenphoto.com.
Fantastic.
Oh, and on Instagram, Pat LaFord Green. Patlaford.
I follow you on the gram. We're Facebook friends. At no point do I think to myself, "Wow, this guy's a jerk." If anything, beautiful pictures and words of wisdom, definitely. Everyone in the chat, thanks for showing up. It's always great to have an audience. And Patrick Green, once again, thanks for coming on the show. I learned stuff. I think I'm a better person. For our conversation. I think that
was purely by accident, I assure you.
Very good. All right, take care, everyone.
See ya.